3D printed recorders. We have Kanan Longway, Kane Stebbins, Peyton Brady Valenta, and Aoife Dubois.
And do you want to hold up your recorders? They made these recorders on the 3D printer.
And there's actually a printer right there printing a recorder right now as well.
Okay.
All right, here we go. This first song is Hot Cross Buns. We also have Waylon Martino. He has been playing drums for a year, and he's going to play a song for us.
We thought we'd get started with our presentation. So everybody can enjoy their food, and then if the kids want to go with Mrs. McKinstry in the library, you can do that if you're not entertained by our slide. It's going to start right now. So before we get into the budget, I want to share with you some celebrations that we have at Enosburg Elementary School. And here, I'll let you take a minute to read that. I know it's small, but that's the vision for EES. Why is that not? Oh, there it is. Okay.
I wanted to share some information on how we're doing right now. And one thing I'm sure many of you have heard about is the STAR reading and the STAR math. And hopefully they're going home and telling you about all the growth they had, because they really take this assessment seriously. And we do it 3 times a year so we can decide what groups maybe students should be in, what skills they might need to work on, or what they need to extend. So if you look at this, this is our STAR reading, and the data from the spring, this is from spring 2025 to winter 2026. You see a 1% drop after summer break 2025 where it dips. Often we'll get a lag over the summer. It's often because kids aren't reading as much. But you can see that we had a nice little spike. We're even higher than we were at the spring last year in students who are meeting proficiency. They are reading at or above grade level. And 3rd and 4th grade happen to be our highest proficiency of in the levels of reading this year so far. And this is growth rate. And so often, I was showing you proficiency just a minute ago. That's meeting the standard or being above the standard. And we also, on STAR, will find out children that need intervention or need extra support. But equally as important as meeting the standard is the growth rate. You want to see kids growing, and typically we want to see between assessments, so we did one in the fall and the one that we just did in January, we want to see about a 50-point gain. And so you can see right here that we had a nice gain for the I'm going to say 60%, it's 59.7. So 60% of our students showed typical or better growth from fall to winter. So that could be, even if you're a struggling learner, if you showed lots of growth, you're included in this. And sometimes, and this is something I really want to work on that I realized, some of our kids that are meeting the standard or above the standard don't always grow as fast. So we got to make sure we're looking at those kids and figuring out what to do with them so that they can grow equally. There you go. The next one is STAR math. And so again, this is meeting the standard or at and above. And the percent of students at or above has increased from the spring of 2025 from 46% proficient to 55% proficient this winter, just a couple weeks ago. So that's showing improvement over 5 assessment windows. So we're getting there, we're growing. We definitely want to go even a little bit faster, but we're proud of what we're doing so far. And once again, the 3rd grade happened to have the most proficient number of students at 70%. So that's outstanding. And again, you can see the growth rate. That's the wrong thing under there. You can see that we have made nice gains in the math, and a lot of our kids are growing at that 50 points or above. So they scored more than 50 points. And I also want to take an opportunity to let you know some exciting news. 3 years ago, we had our planning room and our system for tracking behaviors and other things. Our planning room visits were about 300. And now, and then the next year, we had a change in staff and a few changes in the program, and actually we went up. and increase some write-ups that following year. I am really, really happy to say that this year we did a lot of changing of our behavior system, and one thing that we've done is we really are working on skill building. We're working on positive ways to build those skills, because a lot of times if a child shows a behavior, it's because they just don't know how to do it. If it's blurting out, they don't understand that you're not, it doesn't help you learn when you're blurting out. So we are working on those skill buildings, and our guidance team has skill groups, and our planning room does also do some planning. And we're really having meetings and supporting families that need it, that ask, that even if you're struggling at home with your student and we're seeing like, oh, they're amazing, we're always here to help you, to give you some ideas. So we're really excited. The number of referrals has really dropped quite a bit. And I wanted to share with you our talent show. Every trimester, we try to have a talent show. The kids earn it because they're doing so well, and they can sign up. We had 36 kids do the last talent show, and I'm sure we'll have another one and have just as many. But you can see we had singers, we had gymnastics. Up there in the corner, we have our hockey players, taught us all kinds of hockey tricks. And then taekwondo, and Waylon with his drums. So another thing before we get on with our informational meeting about the budget, I want to tell you about Portrait of a Learner. You might hear this in regards to high school a lot. They started really emphasizing this a few years ago. And Portrait of a Learner focuses on those skills that kids are going to need to be productive citizens, communication, trustworthiness, and all the skills like that. So I do have a paper, and I'll give it to you after, that tells what each one is. So the first thing we did, because we often think, oh, high school, we do this for financial literacy. But how do you do it in the early years? Well, we had a staff meeting, and our teachers took each component and they brainstormed ways that we can teach these skills, or where they're coming out. And it's not something extra, it's something that we're already doing. And as you can see, we made a tree out of their great ideas, and it's right outside when you leave tonight. It's right outside this door, the kitchen door. So, go ahead. So, financial literacy is one that, we had to think about. How do we do financial literacy with elementary school? Communication, well, we work on that pre-K through 5th grade. A lot of them, we work on these things at a very early age. But we were wondering, what can we do with financial literacy? And we came up ideas with a token economy with some of our preschoolers even, which is exciting. But I want to show you what Mrs. Underwood's class did to promote the financial literacy. Can you click on that?
My classroom economy is something I began implementing 3 years ago. Essentially, it was and is a way to begin teaching students about financial literacy and financial responsibilities. As adults, we go to work and are paid. I wanted students to see coming to school and doing their work as their job. Students earn $1 each day for being at school and having a successful day. If they are out sick, do not complete work, or present a challenging day, they lose their pay for the day. Students have wallets and are paid once a week. Each month, they have a rent day to essentially pay rent for their desk and chair. The following day, they are given a shopping day in our classroom store. Students learn to budget their money, how to save, and/or how to spend their money responsibly. This has evolved over the years, with this year's students coming up with being fined, much like a speeding ticket. Students are fined for things such as forgetting to put their name on a paper or having their hood up during class. This means that they pay me $1. I have also partnered with the Community National Bank, who visit my class
That you need to save your money to pay your bills. That it is more important to spend money on your needs and not your wants. To save my money is important things. To budget my money and not spend all of it. To save my money so that I don't get poor. My name's Carson. My name's Sam.
And what are we talking about today?
Money, financial literacy. So, in our classroom, we're doing this thing where our teacher, Miss Evelyn, pays us, and we get little fake dollars, and we put them in these things. They're wallets, and we can buy stuff from our classroom job, and it determines on your behavior 5 days. So if you're good 5 days, you get $5 bills times or 5 ones. If you're good like any other days, you get how much money you got good that day. You get to choose if you want to spend your money or not spend your money, because if you have like $1, you probably wouldn't want to spend it on anything. One, because none of the things cost $1. And second, because you don't want to know what to do. Yeah, that's that.
Kinds of things do you buy?
We could buy Lego sets, sensory game things like blow rocks, sticky people, squishy marble things. Marbles?
Can you buy more recess time?
No.
How do you decide how much something's worth? Who decides that?
There's little labels on the toy packets, and that determines how much money you need to pay to buy that. And some of those cost $20, like mini Lego sets and the sensory toy game. Yeah, for example, if one of the things is $15 and I only had 12, I couldn't buy it unless I got $200. We also have rent. So every month the rent is $7. So and you have to pay that. But if you don't have $7 like me, you have to go in debt. So you have to pay her up the next time when you have money. And then there's fines where if you leave your boots off or if you have a hood, things like on the ground. Yeah, like your sweatshirt's on the ground or stuff like that. No name on paper and stuff. Yeah.
How does it help you?
It keeps us listening and keeps us responsible. For example, you would have to pay her if you didn't do things right, so it kind of makes you want to do things right, so you don't have to pay her.
Does it make you think about money differently?
Yeah, because you need to save up money when you're a kid, so when you're older you have money, when you have a job, so you have like a little head start.
Thank you. So you can see, like, the portrait of a learner, those skills are easily done throughout all the school years, starting in pre-K. And it's so nice to have these kids aware at 4th grade of the value of money and what they have to do. So we're very proud of everybody and doing this. At this time, I'm going to ask Lynn if she'd like to come in and over and talk about the budget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn Coda. I'm the superintendent for Franklin Northeast. I do want to introduce, we have a board member here in the room, Rachel Tatro, who serves on the ERUUSD school board, so she's here to join us tonight. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Morgan Daybell, the CFO for Franklin Northeast.
So Morgan and I will be giving this budget presentation together. So I will start off with some celebrations. So does everyone have an annual report in front of them? Just want to make sure they were on all the tables. So I hope you take some time to read about some of the things that we're doing in Franklin Northeast. Early on in the book, there's a page that is specific for celebrations, and we have a lot to celebrate across the supervisory union. Tonight I'll focus primarily on Enosburg. So we had some student celebrations that were pretty exciting. We had 2 of our athletic teams that ended as state finalists, both our boys baseball team last spring and our girls volleyball team this winter, or this fall. So we're very excited about that. And we also, our boys soccer team won the inaugural Vermont Soccer Officials Association Premier Sportsmanship Award. And that's the first time that that's been given out. So we're very, very proud of our student athletes. We have our Enosburg Middle School students have won the 2025 Vocab Bowl Championship, and they've actually won that several years now. I think 4 or 5 years they have won that. We are pleased that our drama program has kind of come back to life in Franklin Northeast, and our 2 high schools, Enosburg and Richford, have had multiple performances each year. Last spring, they had 1 acts at the Richford Town Hall. Students from both schools participated in that. And this past fall, they did Once Upon a Mattress at Enosburg Middle High School. Students from both schools also participated in that. We celebrated some Enosburg staff members. Maggie Cavazos, who last year was our Flexible Pathways Coordinator in FNESU, and Bev Mayat, who works as a paraeducator here in Enosburg, and Brenna Sturdivant, our school counselor at Enosburg Middle High School, all received Above and Beyond awards at our annual convocation ceremony. We also had Teachers of the Year that were honored in this district. Todd Marlowe received the Secondary Teacher of the Year. He serves at Richford Junior Senior High School. We also have some individual student recognitions that we have students. Miley Decker won the Rail Jam Championship for snowboarding. We have a Green and Gold Scholar, Annabelle Elwood from Enosburg. We also have James St. Pierre, who competed in the Skills USA competition from Cold Hollow, and James took first place in motorcycle repair. We have Peyton is from Richford. Brody Wells from Enosburg was the 2025 track and field champion for the 200 meter, and he took 2nd place in the 100 meter. So we have a lot to celebrate with our students this year, and we're proud to share that. So I'll talk a little bit about our performance indicators. We had that issue in another, there we go. Okay. So what I'm reporting out here is how did FNESU do on the VT-CAP assessment, which is the assessment that all students in Vermont do. FNESU is in blue on this indicator. Vermont state average is in red. Our students are growing. They're getting closer to the Vermont state average. We're not quite where we want to be yet, but we're pleased with the progress we're making. So in several grade levels, you can see we're within a few percentage points of what the Vermont state average is. In those middle levels, that represents 3rd through 9th grade. We're definitely not where we want to be, but we're working hard on improving literacy outcomes with our students. We have new literacy programs. We're providing really intensive professional learning opportunities, and we have worked very hard on our intervention services for all of our students. We also are reporting out on how our students are performing in math compared to students in the rest of the state. There's less of a discrepancy in math. We're extremely proud of our 3rd graders. They outperformed the state average by 9 percentage points this past year. We've done a lot of work, professional learning around mathematics over the years, and we're within a few percentage points in the other grade levels. So we're going to keep working hard in both of those areas. Our goal is always to have more students proficient in each year. I'll tell you a little bit about our district. So we're here tonight talking about the Enosburg-Richford Unified Union School District. Those are all the schools in Enosburg and Richford. In this district, we operate 2 pre-K through 5 elementary schools. and we've color coordinated this data. So Richford Elementary School has 166 students, while Enosburg has 246. Our two middle high schools, Richford has 219 students, while Enosburg has 439. We also are very fortunate to have our own career and technical center in FNESU. That is not something that students have in all parts of the state, and that's a huge benefit for our students. Their access to CTE is really strong here. 93 students attend CTE from Enosburg, 30 from Richford, and we receive tuition for 14 other students that come from different parts of the county to programming at Cold Hollow.
We start the discussion on the budget each year with a look at enrollment. And so on this chart, the first 5 years are the years prior. So this is the current year we're in, and you can see a line for each of our 4 schools. Students who are at the Cold Hollow Career Center are counted in one of the 2 high schools, whichever one they're registered at. We then project that out for 5 years, so we're going out to 2031. And this year we're just under 1,100 kids. In 2031, we think we're going to be at just under 1,100 kids. So enrollment is relatively flat. You'll see that the elementary schools are up a little bit, the high schools are down a little bit, but overall things are pretty stable. And it's important to remember that compared to the rest of the state, stable is quite good. We are not seeing the enrollment declines that the rest of the state is seeing, especially in southern Vermont and in eastern Vermont. And so as we go through this presentation, we will highlight a lot of areas where there's a statewide narrative out there, and it's really not holding true for Franklin Northeast or our part of the state in general. When you go to vote on town meeting day, the first 3 articles that you will see are articles to elect the officers of the district. There are 3 school board seats that are up. There's 1 person running for each seat, although you can write in somebody if you have another candidate you want to put forward. 2 of the seats are for people from Richford. 1 seat is from Enosburg, but everyone in both towns is allowed to vote for all 3 seats. So don't feel like you need to leave one of those blank because it's from a different town. The next article is sort of the important one. It's the one where we are asking the voters for authority to spend just under $25.5 million for the following year. And so that's the amount of money that's necessary to run our 5 schools. This is translated into a per pupil spending amount of $11,430, about a 2.5% increase over the current year. So the budget itself is only up about 1%, again, contrasting that with the statewide narrative of anticipation around the kind of 8-ish% increase overall. We'll be talking a lot more about that 11,430 number, which is the number that we use to compare ourselves with other districts in the state.
In FNESU, we've been working towards 3 big goals since 2022, and these are goals that our FNESU board adopted. So we're working very hard to improve academic proficiency for students at all levels across all content areas. Our major goal, and research supports that this is the right goal to have, is we want all of our students reading on grade level by the time they finish 3rd grade. So we're putting a lot of resources and a lot of effort into meeting that goal. We're also focusing hard on preparing our students for the future that they're going to be inheriting. So thinking about the skills that they need to be successful in career, in college, in the trades, and in life in general. So we're working very hard on that. We're also working hard on ensuring that our students have the skills they need, the social emotional skills that they need for success. In particular, we're really making sure that our students are self-aware. They have some self-management skills. They're socially aware. They have empathy for others. They know how to be collaborative and develop relationships with others, and that they could be responsible and have purpose in their life. So those are the goals that we're working towards across the organization. This will date me a little bit. I went to school in the 70s, And when I was in school in the 70s, school looked a little different than it does now. And the teachers at that time were probably having conversations that are similar to the conversations we have with our teachers now. What do our students need to be successful when they leave us, when they go to college or enter the workforce? In the 70s, the skills that were most important to employers at that time were these: writing, computation, reading, speaking, listening. Those are all pretty content driven. So those academic skills were what employers really valued at that time. Now, in 2025, we're living in a very different world. So there was just a research study done that shows the evolution of what the workforce is expecting or the employers are expecting in their workforce now. So the World Economic Forum completed this Future of Jobs survey in 2025, and they identified 30 core skills that people need in 2025, according to these employers. I've highlighted the top 10. Specifically, the top 5 are analytical thinking, resilience, flexibility and agility, leadership and social influence, creative thinking, motivation, and self-awareness. There's one thing that those skills have in common. What they have in common is that those are not skills that AI can replicate. Those are skills that are inherently human, and only humans can do something with those skills. So our workforce is being transformed in front of our eyes, and it's happening incredibly rapidly. And these are the skills that if people are going to be most successful in the workforce, these are the skills they need to be successful. What we're excited about is that in 2022, when we created those board goals, we were also working towards the development of our portrait of a learner, and Mrs. Hubbard did a wonderful job of segueing into this earlier. So these are the skills and the indicators that we expect all of our graduates to be proficient in when they leave us. This was actually created by a group of students. They started working on this in 2019, and they interacted with community members, they interacted with people from the workforce, higher ed, legislators, and they came up with this, and they said, we think these are the 7 skills that students need to succeed in the future. So they came up with financially literate, independent decision makers, information savvy, creative thinkers, contributors, emotional intelligence, and trustworthy. And those skills, when you think about, those are pretty human-centered skills. And that very much aligns with what the current research is showing us, that people need to be successful in this future job market. So we know that we are today preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist, and we can't really predict what those jobs will be. So we need to make sure that they have those skills necessary to be adaptable. And I will say this is really hard work because it's a shift from how we've really focused on education in the past. The reason that we are working so hard on this is that we feel it's important for us to look up and really look at what do our students need. It would be a lost opportunity if we thought about what we needed based on our experience when we were in school in our generation, because that was very different than what our students are needing now. So why we're doing this to advantage them in whatever pathway they're going to go down in their future.
We're going to talk a little bit at a high level of some of the changes in this budget compared to the current year. So again, remember, current budget is up about 1% or just over $250,000. This budget is proposing staffing cuts of about 8.5 full-time positions. These are positions that either we have not been able to fill over the last couple of years but have been trying, or positions where people have recently left, and conversations with the principals, we've decided we didn't need to backfill those. So they're not people losing jobs, but they are positions that we're no longer looking to fill. Despite the fact that we're only going up $260,000, health insurance alone is going up over $500,000. We saw an increase in premiums this year of 7%. But if we look over the last roughly 8 years, the cost for a family plan was $17,000 and change in FY18. This year, it's over $40,000. So over a 200% increase in just those last 8 years. And that's really what's been driving the increases of school budgets in large part across the state over the last few years.
Do we know where those big increases are coming from? I know healthcare goes up a lot, but where's it even coming from?
It is coming from usage. It's a very generous plan that's been negotiated, and so I don't have the exact numbers, but I think if I cause doctor bills worth about $10,000, after I've paid my premium, I'm only going to pay about $200 out of pocket. And that is something that's now negotiated at the statewide level. There are some changes that folks have been trying to get through that would, I think, slow that increase, but so far we've not been successful in getting those in.
I do think there are other drivers in the state. I think that hospitals like education are contending with the need for consolidating services to be more financially efficient, because I think that they're also in an unsustainable pathway as well.
There is also some good news in terms of the budget. We are anticipating 9 more high school students coming into the district from towns that tuition their high school students. So that's a bit of a help. And then the supervisory union assessment, which covers things like special ed, food service, us coming to these meetings, is actually going to be down about $125,000 next year. I won't drill into the staffing changes specifically. I'll just say that highlight for the 2 elementary schools, the reduction has really been in paraeducator support. The teaching positions have been primarily at the high schools, but we are also bringing 1 part-time and 2 full-time teachers in from our federal grants into the local budget. And so the cut from the local budget, there were actually those 2.5 positions on top of those 8.5 for a net of 8.5. The next 2 charts look at the proposed budget first in terms of what we buy. So you'll see 2/3, almost 3/4 is in red. This is what we spend on our own people. So that first half is in salaries, and then this section that's dark red at the bottom is in benefits. That's 20% of the budget. About 15% of the budget is healthcare. The sections in blue are things that are in support of education. That big section is called purchase services. A large chunk of that is the supervisory union assessment. So that's actually your people as well. It's your food service workers, it's your special educators, it's those folks who are deployed from the supervisory union to help students in the building. And I'll just leave you with the section in green is what we spend on stuff. So this is supplies, it's paper, it's crayons, it's whatever the teachers need to have in front of students in their class. And that's less than 5% of the budget. So when we go to these meetings, we often hear, if you only locked down your copying machines and didn't let teachers make photocopies, you'd save a lot of money. Or if you bought your pens and pencils in bulk, you'd save a lot of money. What we're talking about is less than 5% of the budget. We then look at that same budget based on what we do. So the first half in green is kind of what we think of traditional school, like students in front of kids in classrooms. The section in blue are things that are supporting that instruction. So kind of moving our way around the clock. We have nurses and guidance counselors. We have technology and professional development for teachers. Small slice for the Board of Education and some district-wide insurance. Section for your 5 principals and their staff. Again, the central services is that chunk of special education and food service and us. The dark section on top is the cost of maintaining your 5 buildings, and then right up at 12 o'clock is the cost of getting kids to and from school.
So you've probably seen this visual represented before. So each of the lines, if we're looking at the visual on the right-hand side, each of those lines represent per weighted pupil spending for all 119 districts across the state of Vermont. So you can see we have a low that is, I can't read the numbers again.
It's about
Now-
9,200,
And on the upper range, 18.
18,400.
So there's quite a discrepancy between the lowest spending systems in the state and the highest. So the red lines reflect our other partners in Franklin County. There are two black lines in the middle. The top black line reflects the statewide average per weighted pupil spending. The bottom black line represents the Franklin County per weighted pupil statewide spending. The two blue lines at the bottom reflect our two districts. That top blue line is the Northern Mountain Valley District. That's Bakersfield, Berkshire, Montgomery, Sheldon. They operate pre-K through 8. Our Enosburg Richford is the bottom blue line. On this graph, what's important to note, on the left side is a visual that kind of pulls out the bottom 20 or so. What's important to note is that the bottom 5 are systems that don't operate schools. They tuition out all of their students, so they don't actually have operating costs, they're paying tuition. Enosburg, we have the benefit of being able to see all the warned budgets in the state of Vermont. We're expecting that both in the NMV district and the Enosburg Richford district that we will drop several steps on this spending comparison. In the Enosburg Richford district, we are likely to be the lowest spending per pupil of all operating systems in the state of Vermont. There's only one district, and they don't vote on their budget until April. So they could possibly be the lowest. So we anticipate we'll be the lowest or second lowest operating district for next year for this FY27 budget. So that being said, I just want to say that we're still proud of the work that we're doing with our students. We don't have the resources that other systems have in terms of educating students and supporting our teachers and staff, but at the same time, we work really hard to find those opportunities outside of what we're getting from taxpayers. So we're pretty scrappy at FNESU, and we work hard to get competitive grants, and we work really hard to think about, okay, we have this much money, is this the most efficient way that we can spend this money? We're going to talk a little bit about both of those. I'm really glad that Heather is here, lurking in the corner. Heather is our after-school program director. She's also masterful at writing competitive grants. One of the most recent grants that Heather received was another 21st Century Community Learning Center grant. She was able to pull in another $533,000 to support our LEAPS after-school programming. And she's brought in millions to the district to support those after-school programs. We also, on the Enosburg Richford side of our system, received a Vermont Educate and Innovate Award grant of $15,000, and that went to Enosburg High School. Russ Lamontia, one of our science teachers, wrote that grant this year. He was able to purchase 3D printers, a 3D scanner, a computer numerical control router. I don't know what that is, but I know the kids think it's really cool, and computers for 3D modeling. So they're doing some really amazing things with students with these tools. This is the second year that they've done the lottery grant in Vermont. Last year, 2 schools across the state received it. We received it last year for the other side of our district in NMV. And then we received it again this year for the Enosburg Richford side of it. Another way that we used resources was during COVID, we had ESSER money. It was federal grant money that was given to us to be able to spend. And there were some strings attached to it, but we were able to be really creative. And one thing that we did was think about this as an opportunity. How do we invest in highly engaging resources for our students to be able to advantage them the way we haven't been able to in the past? So we used some of that ESSER money to start our first robotics team at Enosburg High School. And these kids were in their very first year last year. They worked together. They were given a task by the first robotics at the statewide level. And what they had to do, last year's teams had to build a robot that could pick up essentially a PVC pipe and place it onto some sort of a receiving thing in the middle of the court that they play on. And this all happens really fast, and you're bumping into other people's robots, and you're playing with others that are also on your team. So if you're in that book, if you see that book online, it's on our website, it's also on our Facebook page. If you could go to the link at the very bottom and just click onto that to see what the kids were able to do with their robots is pretty impressive. And now we're in year 2 and they have almost twice as many students in that first robotics class. So we're really excited about that. One thing that I didn't know is that there's some confusion about what governance models look like in the state of Vermont. So we're a supervisory union, and that is a little bit of a complex governance structure. So we're here tonight talking to you about our Enosburg Richford schools, and we were in another school earlier this week talking about the NMV schools. So we're a supervisory union, that's what's reflected at the top, and we have 2 separate districts that operate under us. We can't just be one because those schools on the NMV side have high school choice. They only operate pre-K through 8. During Act 46, they didn't want to give away that choice, so we couldn't become just one supervisory district. We had to keep 2 separate districts. So that's why our structure looks like that. It's a little more complicated because we are really 3 separate entities. We have 3 separate budgets. We have 3 separate audits, 3 separate payrolls. There's a lot of redundancy in what we do. We also have three separate boards. So sometimes that could be a barrier. I'm going to compare us to our neighbors next door at MVU. During Act 46, they also had an unlike structure. They had Sheldon. Sheldon wasn't part of their union agreement. Sheldon was their one school that still had choice. The state board gave us Sheldon during that consolidation. So when they gave us Sheldon, they all could become just one board. So they have a very simple governance structure. They have one board, they have one budget, they have one audit. So they could be really flexible. Everything is under that one budget umbrella, and they can use physical and human resources with great flexibility. That's different than ours. However, I said we're a little scrappy. We work hard to figure out how to make this work. So in the past, if we wanted to hire instructional coaches, each principal would be trying to hire an instructional coach on their own. Some of them would be able to find one, some wouldn't. So those other schools would just be out of luck. They wouldn't have any, and some may have more than they need. So there was a time where we probably had a half dozen instructional coaches or more. So instead of doing it that way, where those decisions are getting made at the school level, we looked at what are some of the positions that are really, that we could target that support out based on either teacher need or student need. So now all of our emerging multilingual supports, all of our instructional coaching, technology integration, special education, food service, and facilities comes through our SU budget, and that gives us the greatest flexibility because we can look out at the district and say, this school needs this much in terms of emerging multilingual services, and this school needs this much. And as student need changes and kids move, we can adjust where we couldn't adjust before. So that's one way that we're able to be more financially efficient now. The next piece is about our alternative programs. I think Michelle and Robin are here. They're our dynamic special ed team, Michelle Taberge, Robin Gagne. We have multiple alternative programs that we've built within FNESU. We have always had students that have had needs that were more complex than could be met in the general education classroom. So in the past, those students would get to the place where their needs couldn't be met in the general education classroom anymore, and then we would look outside of the system. We would look for an out-of-district placement. Those students maybe would have been sent to a Project SOAR or a Laraway, or they would have been sent to a place called Centerpoint. Those stars on the visual up there represent general areas where we've sent students to alternative placements in the past. Every time we did that, we had to pay tuition and we had to pay transportation for those students. So we took a look at what would that cost now? Because right now we don't have any students in out-of-district placements. They're all within FNESU. Today, if we had a student that we were sending to an out-of-district placement, that average cost would be between $100,000 and $150,000. And then for every student, their individual transportation cost would be between $40,000 and $60,000. So we haven't done that, not just financially, but also based on the type of program we can do. So we have created a RISE program. We have Little Rise here at Enosburg Elementary. We have Big Rise at Enosburg High School, and we serve students who have intensive developmental disabilities. And we are able to meet those students where they are. We're able to get them out into the community, help them to be a part of their community, have them be in our classroom spaces in a supported way. We also have the STEPS program, which is at the marketplace, and we have a little space that we share with the youth center during the day. We rent a portion of that space for some of our older students that are in the STEPS program. Those are for students who have intensive behavioral challenges and they need some skill building outside of the general ed classroom. So we're doing that in the community, and we're in many cases able to reintegrate them back into their schools with greater success than what we used to have. We're doing that in-house this year for $47,000 per pupil, and that includes all of the transportation, all of the costs. We're projecting out that next year it could be as much as $60,000. I'll tell you it won't be. That's our wish list. If we could fill all the positions that we would like to fill, it would be around $60,000, but we often can't do that. So the work we're doing is making a difference for kids, and it's also costing taxpayers way less per pupil.
So we have several slides of math here, and I'll try to make it as painless as possible. And I'll start by saying everything you see here is up on our website. We actually go into much more detail than we'll do tonight. So if you're interested in the numbers behind the numbers, please tune in there. Just make sure if you go there that you're on the Enosburg-Richford section, not the NMV section or the SU section. And so on this chart, we start with the warned budget of just about $25.5 million. This is the number that we're looking for authority to spend. We know that we're going to get a little over $6 million in tuition payments from the towns that are sending high school students here, as well as a number of grants primarily tied to the tech center. We also know that we've got $336,000 in the bank from last year that we're going to put forward to this budget. And so if we take the amount that we're going to spend and we subtract those two things out, we have what's called education spending, just under 19 million. And this is the number that, if this budget passes, I'm going to go to the state and say, we need this $19 million to run our schools. The state is obliged to come up with that. They come up with that in homestead property tax, non-homestead property tax, and then another number of other funding streams, primarily sales tax, also a little bit of meals and use tax and lottery and Medicaid money. This number is divided by what's called the long-term weighted ADM, or our student count, to come up with that per pupil spending figure of $11,430. That's the number that's on the warning, and that's the number that pegs us on that graph that Lynn was talking about a few slides back. We are counting 1,653 kiddos. As I had said before, we only have about 1,100 kids in our schools, but we get to count certain kids more. The state knows that kids who do not hear English spoken at home cost more to educate. Kids who are living in poverty cost more to educate. And so we get a bump up for certain categories of students, and this is something that the Agency of Education calculates, and it impacts all districts across the state. So that's how we get to that $11,430 figure. To get to a tax rate, to raise that 25% of the spending from homestead ratepayers, the legislature will set what's called the dollar yield, and this is just a number that they calculate to make sure that they're going to raise enough money statewide to cover all of these ed spending bills that we're going to send them over the summer. By dividing the per pupil spending by that yield rate, we come up with a district rate of just over $1.29, or about a half-cent decrease from last year. We're spending a little bit more money, but we're counting more kids, so that per pupil count goes down the more kids you count, and the yield number is a little bit stronger than it was last year. The yield number that we're using here is one that the tax department published in December. It's the number that most districts use when they're presenting information to the budgets. We know this number will be wrong. We know that the legislature will set it in probably May, June timeframe, so we won't know it until long after the budget votes. But what we are hearing going through the legislature now is that the yield will be significantly higher, and this district level tax rate, if the yield number that's being discussed today were passed, would be down about another 7 cents. That's primarily because of some of those other funding streams are coming in stronger, but the governor has also proposed using $75 million in one-time money to buy down tax rates. It's something that we do in Vermont every year, and the legislature seems willing to take that. Certainly, it's an election year, and everybody wants your tax rates to be lower than they would otherwise. So half cent decrease. This would be great if that's where the story stopped, but then we have to apply what's called the common level of appraisal. And this is a number that's calculated by the tax department, and it is an attempt to make sure that property taxpayers across the state pay an amount that is fair compared to their neighbors. We all know that grand lists are not as accurate in one town compared to the next based on when the last reappraisal was. So in Enosburg, their common level of appraisal is pegged at 86%, and that drives this $1.29 district tax rate up by about 20 cents, or a 7-cent increase over last year. Again, this is using that December 1 number that we know is likely to be better. Conversely, in Richford, their common level of appraisal is actually bringing that tax rate down. So they're going from a district rate down to a town tax rate of just over $1. And that's the number that they're going to see on their tax bills. The next slide kind of shows that CLA in effect. So if you're an Enosburg taxpayer and you see the number 200,000 on your tax bill, that's what the town says your property is worth. The state thinks that that's actually worth $329,000, and they want to tax you based on that value. In Richford, that $200,000 value, the state thinks that property is only worth $221,000, and that's because Richford went through a reappraisal a couple of years ago, and Enosburg is long overdue for one. So this is their attempt to make sure that everyone is paying based on the fair market value or what you could sell your house for, rather than that number that you get from the town. This kind of just shows it as a graph, and you can see here, this is the year that Richford went through their reappraisal. So they dropped from, call it $1.21 down to 87 cents in 1 year. We're anticipating that when Enosburg finalizes their reappraisal and those numbers are live, they're going to see a similar drop. I don't know if that'll be next year or the year after, but my understanding is that they're at least out looking for someone to do the appraisal at this point.
I'll just add one piece there. When Richford did the reappraisal, it's tempting to look at that number and think they must have paid a lot less in taxes. They actually didn't, because they paid a lower rate on a property with a much higher assessed value. So it is important for the community to go through the reappraisal, but looking at it through the lens of that's going to save us a lot of money, that the state is still going to work to equalize that out. So you'll be paying what they consider your fair share. So less tax rate, higher appraised value, most likely.
There are charts, I believe, in the annual report and also on our website that shows what these projected rates would mean to certain taxpayers. In this case, most people who are paying based on income would see a reduction in their tax rate. And again, this is using that December 1 letter, so before we get a better yield in there. homes that have household income below $115,400 will likely see some sort of credit, some sort of buy down on their tax bill. So it's a bar that catches a lot of our community members. If you're paying based solely on the value of your house, so you're making over $115,000, you can see here, and you can see in the annual report what those projected increases would be based on different values. And again, using the December 1 yield, we think this is a worst case scenario, and the final rates will be much better.
So you have likely heard of Act 73 at this point. So Vermont is about to embark on pretty substantial reorganization. So Act 73 was passed last year. They're still working this year to figure out details, and a lot of things need to happen in order for all of it to actually come into play. Here are some of the things that are already in law that are already set into play. So graduation requirements they'll now be expected to be statewide. We should see what those graduation requirements are going to be no later than July 1, 2027. And those will be in play for the class of 2031. So there's some runway there, but they're working currently. The agency has made a recommendation. It's now in the hands of the State Board of Education, who will be making the final decision. They'll be taking testimony for the next year on statewide graduation requirements. Also, currently, superintendent regions of the state are required by law to create school calendars together, so we're supposed to regionally align. Within this, it's now expected that we'll have a statewide calendar by July 1, 2028, so that's work that the Agency of Education will have to do. Superintendents for the last 2 years across the state have worked to get us much closer to an aligned calendar. We're not quite there yet, but we're closer. We also saw, as a result of the Act 73 shifts last year, that the number of private and independent schools that are allowed to receive our public tuition dollars declined pretty substantially. Our dollars now have to stay within the state of Vermont, and that has not always been the case. We pay tuition on the other side, and we have paid for students to go internationally, whatever that statewide average tuition rate is. Before, that can't happen anymore. So just within the state of Vermont, and then the number of schools within the state of Vermont also decreased pretty substantially based on the number of students that were publicly funded there last year. One of the changes that Morgan's going to talk about is around district consolidation. So what they're talking about is fewer superintendents, fewer business managers, and those superintendents and business managers would have a lot more entities below them, a lot more schools below them. So they're not really talking about schools, consolidating schools at this time, but they have put some things into the law that will force some of Vermont's super small schools to make some tough decisions, and we're already seeing that across the state. So we have class size minimums now in Vermont that went live on July 1, 2025. So you could see in our education quality standards that depending on the grade level, there's a minimum for each of those. So first grade, 10 student minimum, 12 students minimum, second through fifth, 15 students in 6th through 8th, and 18 and 9 through 12. So all schools across the state are working to be able to have more students in classrooms. What this will do to some of the ultra small schools in Vermont, and by the way, our smallest school in FNESU, there are about 100 schools in Vermont that are smaller than our smallest school. So this is having a different impact on some of those smallest schools. They can't combine more than 2 grade levels to get to that minimum. And some schools have very, very small classes. So over the course of the next 3 years, we're expected to meet those minimums. And if you are a school that fails to meet the minimum for 3 consecutive years, in the law, there are kind of consequences for that. So if you do that, the State Board of Education will take recommendations from the Agency of Education, and they could do one of the following 5 things. They could require technical assistance from the Agency of Education. They could say, you know, they're going to adjust the supervisory union boundary. Now you're going to be merged with this system. They also could assume control of a school, they could close a school, or they could require district consolidation. So it's not really optional that we're working towards the class size minimums. And that's one of the intentions in the law, to try to get to scale by putting a little pressure on that at the school level. I'm going to come back to
So
that.
the governance discussion is the one that's kind of taken up most of the oxygen in the room in terms of Act 73. In theory, the legislature is going to draw those larger districts when they leave in June, or at least by July 1st is what the law says. So that's the plan that gets rid of some of Lynn and some of me across the state. Again, it's making it possible to close schools in the future, but it's not about closing schools. They had appointed a task force to bring 3 proposed maps to them where they could start their work. The task force took a pass on that and said that they weren't going to bring any maps. So they've been struggling for the first part of the session around where to start. Today, actually, we just learned that there was a map that was presented in House Education Committee, which is one of the 2 committees that's kind of taking the lead on this. In that map, it had Franklin Northeast, so our 2 districts, combined with MVU and combined with Allberg. That's roughly 4,000 kids in that area. Again, it's just a starting point. There's going to be a lot of lobbying to go bigger, go smaller, scrap it completely. So we don't know where that will end. But the current law says they would like districts between 4,000 and 8,000. So that checks that box. If they wanted to add Maple Run, that would be roughly 8,000 with the 3 of us up here. If they wanted to go lower than that, and the superintendents have been in there saying that research says district size should be between 2,000 and 4,000. Well, as a system, we're at 2,000 right now. So it could just be that we lose that supervisory union structure, but we have the same number of schools here. They also need to decide how to elect those school board members. Under the mergers on Act 46, they kind of left it up to everybody to figure it out. There are a lot of different systems out there. They are going to try to come up with some way that it's a little more accurate in terms of 1 person, 1 vote. There's no committee that's started on that because they can't start that work until they know what the map is. In theory, those new boards would be elected in November of 2027, and the new boards would be running those schools in 2028. So if you think about that, election in November 2027, you have your first board meeting in December of 2027, got to spend a few months merging the philosophy of these boards because they're coming from very different places. Then you have to hire a superintendent. Then superintendent has to hire their staff, and they're expecting that to be live 7 months later. We've long been telling people that timeline is not accurate. We can't really have the timeline discussion until they get through the mapping piece. But it's like, I'm hopeful that somebody tunes into that who has the ability to change it. I won't say it's likely. With those governance changes, there's also a pretty radical change to how we fund schools. So this is right now contingent on new districts being drawn. There is some discussion in Montpelier because I think some people don't think we're going to come out of this session with maps. They want to pull this funding formula out and just make this go live whether or not we have new districts. But under the current system, the board can set whatever budget they want, and you, the voters, can vote whatever budget you want. And if you vote a budget, the state is required to come up with the money to fund that. That's very unique to Vermont. And the shift to an educational opportunity payment kind of turns that on its head and does what 46 or 48 other states are doing right now. And what that is that the state says, we're going to give you a certain amount of money per kid, and that's going to be your budget. There will be some opportunity to spend more than that if you go in front of the voters, But for a system like ours, where we've been spending at the bottom of the state, it's likely to be more money, and it'll be certainly long after we're gone that anybody would contemplate having to spend more. There are some other minor changes as well, change in how the property tax credit is calculated, and they're also, they've split out the non-homestead list. So right now, if you're in a town, it doesn't matter if your non-homestead property is a camp or a business or an Airbnb or a second home, you're paying the same tax rate. They want to be able to split that out, I think, so that they can encourage rental properties and discourage Airbnbs, and probably encourage businesses and discourage second homes. They haven't made any of those changes yet, but clearly they're putting in place the ability to do that in the future. The other money article that is on the warning is looking for permission to take half of the money that was left over in 2025 and put it into a capital reserve fund. This is a fund that we've been funding, I think, since we've been a unified district, and certainly the forming districts had done this in the past as well. And this is money that we can use to do things like the asbestos abatement that we have coming up here, projects that are large enough that they shouldn't really be carried in the regular general fund budget. What? We gain a little bit, yeah. We actually, it's more likely that we use it for cash flow. So on July 1, we don't go out and borrow a bunch of money to make payroll. We just kind of borrow from ourselves. And then finally, voting day is March 3rd in Enosburg. It's at the Public Safety Building. Polls open at 10 and close at 7. Early voting starts on February 11th. After that date, you can go to the town clerk and vote in person. You can request a ballot to be mailed to you. You can pick up a ballot and mail it back. Just be aware that it's been many years since Vermont's had next day mail service, so plan accordingly. And you can also register to vote the day that you vote. So if we did this presentation at Richford High School and was telling the students there, if they turn 18 on March 2nd, they can vote on this budget if they want to. And you do that either at the polling location or at the town clerk's office. And I think with that, we're happy to take any questions that folks have.
Can we go back to the "that sounds horrible" part? Was it the larger classes? What part?
It's my, costs and everything going up. People are not have as many children. Now they're telling you, well, if you don't have enough children in these classes, then you can't have a school there. It really takes away from those small communities. It sounds horrible.
It's one of those things that there's a tension, because we're figuring out how to have high quality education for our students at a rate that is affordable for our taxpayers, and trying to make it equitable for the systems across the state. Because when you look at the disparity in per pupil spending, you can imagine that right now what our students are being offered isn't exactly aligned with what some of the higher spending districts are. So we really want all three of those things, but we really, one of my colleagues says this beautifully, can't have all three of those things. You've got to pick two of the things. We want to keep all of our schools, and we've got to be good with paying for it. And people are really not good with paying for it right now. And we really do. Our Constitution actually requires that all students in Vermont have access to equitable educational opportunities, and that isn't true right now. So they have to do something with this. And I think there are little bits of this. We can all find something we don't like in this, and hopefully when we get to the end place, we'll be able to be okay with some of the things we'll find the things that we do like in it.
I think we also, we have to think about the definition of small as well. I went to high school in New York, and I had a graduating class of 200, and that felt small, by the time I graduated. This school feels small. This school's kind of pretty big by Vermont standards. I was presenting about a month ago to a a new principals academy, a new principals training, and there was a principal there. I'm guessing she was at a school that had about 60 kids in it, K6 or K8, and she only had one kiddo in her pre-K class. That kid is not going to get a good education in that school. And so we got to kind of think about where that line is and where we lose the benefit for the students.
Any other questions? I want to thank you all for staying for the budget presentation. We really appreciate it. We'll stick around if anybody thinks of a question that they have. And again, thank you for coming. Thank you for hosting, Mrs. Hubbard.
If anybody wants to apply for a job, we still have some openings.
We do. We always have openings. One thing I forgot to say that I wish I had of when we were talking about the alternative programs, Michelle and Robin, we have presented at the state level a couple of times now, and they're probably getting close to 10 different districts across the state who've come to visit to see what exactly we're doing here in our alternative programs. And it's pretty spectacular to see others trying to replicate what we're doing. And I will just mention for Heather also, we were the only school in the state, was it last year? The year before, that was allowed a pass-through grant. We just got our funding. We didn't have to reapply for our LEAPS after-school program because they were performing well. So we're proud of those things. Thank you, everyone.